Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We're talking about passive techniques for energy efficiency. And in this video, I'm going to start off with some of these solar techniques. And so you can see on the left here a list of what we're going to cover. We'll look at building orientation and daylighting. Building orientation, how is that a sustainability technique? Well, it turns out that we can organize our building according to the natural variations in solar energy. Right? So what you want to do is place functions where they make the most sense according to the sun's path. It turns out some spaces can actually be buffer zones than others, for others, excuse me. And as you do this and as you consider your building orientation, also consider window size and location. So let's walk around a typical building here. We have a residence for an example, and talk about these different solar orientations. Let's start in the south. The south gets the most sun during the day. This is ideal for spaces that need a lot of daylight, but you want to use overhangs to control excess heat and especially glare. Moving around to east and west facing, both of these sides get low angle sunlight. All right, the east facing gets low angle sunlight in the morning and the west in the afternoon. Why are these different? Well, a building is often cooler in the morning because it cooled off overnight. All right, so sometimes that morning sun is welcome. In the afternoon, however, that is the hottest part of the day, and those west-facing windows are the hardest to control the heat and the glare. Finally, ending up on the north side of the building, this side is never going to get direct sun. All right, it doesn't enter the building from the north side. But windows to the north will let in soft and diffuse skylight. That's light that has been bouncing around the environment and comes in from the sky. All right, but be careful, especially in cooler climates. You're going to leak heat in the window, excuse me, in the winter from these windows. Let's move on and talk about daylighting. What's daylighting? It's the idea of lighting a building with the sun instead of electric or artificial lights. Historically, daylighting was dominant in every building, and we've moved away from that as electric lights have become predominant. Daylighting has strong psychological and practical benefits. And so we need to carefully consider your window orientation and location and sizing. It's critical to both the quality, what kind of light you're bringing in, and the amount of light. Let's talk about the connection between daylighting and energy efficiency. Obviously, the more daylight you use, the less energy you need to spend on artificial lighting. And along with that reduction in energy use for lighting, all right, it will also reduce the energy used for heating and cooling. How do we get daylight in our building? How do we use it for our designs? Well, windows and skylights are the most obvious way to bring light into your building. There's a couple different options. You can use clerestories, light tubes, skylights, and monitors. All right. You also want to keep an eye on the different floor plate design. And now I'm talking about the size and shape of your actual building. All right. With narrower floor plates, more interior spaces are close to windows. If you have a broad floor plates, you've got a space in the middle of your building that just really doesn't have any access to windows. And finally, you can use some reflective surfaces to bounce and transmit the light farther into the building. And the most common way to do this is called a light shelf. Let's talk about windows and daylighting. And the first fact is pretty obvious. All right, the larger and the higher a window is designed, all right, the more daylight will enter. But let's quantify it. It turns out that effective task illumination, which is the amount of light that you need to do a task, all right, often at a desk height, as is shown in this illustration, all right, effective task illumination is going to penetrate into a room up to a depth of twice the height of a window. Wait, how does that work? Let's take a look. Here in our illustration, here is the height of our window, and notice that we're talking about the head height. We're not talking about the height of glass, all right? We need to measure all the way from the floor up to the head height of the window. And then we will know that that task illumination will extend into the room twice that height. I mentioned light shelves earlier. Light shelves will reflect daylight up onto the ceiling of a room, all right, and therefore bounce it deeper into the space. What you want to do is build your light shelf out of a light colored specular material, not necessarily a reflective material, but specular, all right? And that will allow the light to penetrate even deeper than that 2 times rule of thumb we mentioned. Light shelves can help with glare and shade from direct sunlight, so help with heat gain also. All right. Let's take a look at this diagram. You can see we've cut a section through a wall here, and we've got the view window. All right, so where this kid is looking out is the view window. And here's a light shelf. It's a horizontal object right here. The sun will come and hit that shelf and bounce up, right? And therefore the light hits the window and will travel deeper into a room. Couple other daylighting tips. For the most balanced daylighting scheme, allow the daylight into your room from at least 2 directions. And this can be from 2 different windows. It can be from a window and a skylight. There's a bunch of different ways to do this. But if you only have one window, you're going to have extremely directional light, and it's better to have it coming from 2 directions. The second tip is you can use, and you probably should, skylights and roof monitors. Also, if you want to bounce light further into your room, we already talked about light shelves, but you can add a window next to a side wall to bounce light in a horizontal direction. Finally, when you're talking about daylighting, always keep in mind you're letting the light in, but you're also letting the heat in your building unless you shade your windows. One last note here, we just talked about skylights and roof monitors. Ooh, what are those? Here's an example of some of the different vocabulary you might need when designing your daylighting. And the first one is a clerestory. A clerestory is typically a window high up in the wall section. All right, so you can see that this is part of the wall. This one happens to be inset slightly. Another vocabulary word is monitor. A monitor is like a skylight, only the glass is vertical. All right. You can see this one is at an angle, but it's not a horizontal opening. A sawtooth is a type of monitor. It's a specific type of roof monitor in which you have this angled design. All right, and you can see that the light will come in and hit this angled piece of roof and bounce into the building. That's why that's a popular design. Right. And finally, a skylight, simply the name for any horizontal aperture. Thanks, everyone. You just learned how to use building orientation and daylighting as passive design techniques.